So here's an interesting one. I recently did the video a couple of days ago about the disconnect between the stadium operator, the LLDC, and, of course, West Ham United Football Club. There's been an awful lot going on, particularly with regard to legal disputes, with regard to the fact that the LLDC have spent, up to this point, over £7 million in legal fees fighting West Ham. Not healthy at all. Not healthy. Doesn't matter which way you look at it. That's not good. That is a classic landlord v tenant situation. Technically, if you're going to annoy your landlord, if you're going to pee them off, right? Technically, can they kick you out? No, they can't. But as I mentioned this a couple of days ago, the first opportunity they get to try and get rid of you, they will do. So, you know, that's the trouble when you just totally and utterly rely on your rights and what you should get and what you're entitled to and what you deserve and what the contract says, rather than actually building relationships. That actually gets you a lot further. Hey, that's what I think anyway. Ideally, it'd be both. You'd have the contract and the nice working relationship. Sorry, I should probably just point that out. Anyway, so that was all with regards to West Ham buying the stadium. To fill in the blanks, the most recent rumours have been that Daniel Kretinsky might want to buy the remaining shares or get at least enough shares to get full control of the club. Then Kretinsky would be offering to buy the stadium for £400 million, right? And that was that. That's why it's been in the news. At the same time, the stories come out that actually the stadium might have cost the taxpayer by the time we finished £1 billion. It's not just the legal fees, by the way. They hemorrhage over £20 million a year. We've covered all this. You understand that, right? That's why the story was there. But it was very much a case of West Ham buy the stadium, then the ownership gets to sell the club. And it's worth more. West Ham is worth more if we own our own ground. It's as simple as that, basically. It's worth an awful lot if we own a ground in what is really up-and-coming real estate lands, basically. You've seen the sort of gentrification of the area. You've seen all the new builds that have gone up there. Property prices have skyrocketed there. So you've got to say whoever has their eye on West Ham probably got their eye on a little bit of the real estate surrounding area, shrink the stadium down a bit, make a load of whatever they're going to build. Something nice, something big, something juicy that they can sell off and make more money on. That's the attractive part of owning West Ham. You get the land as well. However, David Sullivan came out yesterday. I don't even know I'm going to upload this video, to be fair. But whatever. Hey, David Sullivan, pretty much hot on the heels of all that West Ham stadium news and rumours coming out. So we don't want to buy the stadium. We don't want to buy the stadium. We got a great deal, which is pretty much what I was saying. The deal is too good. The deal is too good. We got a great deal. And why would we want to buy it when we can rent it? Because the rent is so cheap. The rent goes up in line with inflation. Well, you know what? The rent probably does go up in line with inflation. What it does take into account that the price of everything else has gone up. So unfortunately, just the rise in inflation doesn't quite cover the energy costs and all the staffing costs and all the rest of it. It just doesn't work like that. So we know the stadium's hemorrhaging money. They can't continue to afford it, and there's this bad blood has been allowed to fester between the two main protagonists, i.e. the club and the stadium. But saying you don't want to own it, you only want to rent it, ooh. I don't believe him, by the way. I think this is another bargaining chip. I think this is another negotiation technique. Because for all the reasons I said, the club is worth so much more if they own the stadium. But again, I think they're trying to drive such a hard bargain. It's not a case of trying to get it to the point where they can buy the stadium. I think, reading between their lines, they probably want to screw them to such an extent that actually the taxpayer, or whatever, the London mayor is turning round to West Ham and saying, we'll pay you to take it. Maybe that's what they want. was a really interesting thing in what was said, though. And that was about the ever-increasing maintenance costs. Now, I don't know if you've seen anything recently about the Emirates, about the roof leaking and stuff like that. I'll assume you have. If you haven't, go and search for it. Basically, it's breaking. The Emirates, particularly the roof, is breaking. It was really interesting what I heard about the maintenance costs about the Olympic Stadium, because I had heard recently that actually that's sort of breaking as well. That's not surprising. I'm already nearly 6 minutes into this video. Let me see if I can summarise this really quickly. When the Olympics was announced, UK Athletics put a load of money in to build the stadium. I said, anyone else want to help out? Primarily West Ham. West Ham, do you want to help us build this stadium? And what we do is, if we build it, we'll future-proof it. So at the end, when the games are over, it can easily be converted into a football stadium. West Ham said no. We had Icelandic ownership at the time. We said no. So they tried to work out what to do at the time. So what they decided to do was dig into the ground and build what was, and this is all the concrete stuff that you can see there, was the permanent structure was going to be a 25,000-seater athletic stadium. For the purposes of the games, they were going to bolt on all these, all the metalwork you see on the outside and all of that sort of stuff. That was always going to go on top of I am not an engineer, you can probably tell that. But on top of the main frame, the subframe, whatever you want to call it, all this other stuff was going to be bolt-ons to make it a 90,000-seater stadium for the Olympics, right? And then what they were going to do was, at the end of it, revert it back to a nice, solid, well-built, good foundations, 25,000-seater athletic stadium. However, something changed. Golden Sullivan came in and said, hold on, we want a bit of that. We want to get into the Olympic Stadium. So that was fine, and I'm not going to... the deal was far more complicated than I'll give it credit to. Basically, we were meant to buy it. Daniel Levy and Barry Hearn protested. Then it went out to tender as only a lease. We got the lease. That's what happened. There were some upgrades that were needed to the roof and whatnot. Cost an absolute fortune to the taxpayer. But the original problems still remain. And that is what you got. Half of that stadium is a temporary structure. So to hear now that it's creaking and breaking, and particularly there are problems with the roof, which was... do you remember these words? It was part of the glossy spiel that Karen Brady gave when she was talking about the stadium. I think that... I was going to say, do you remember the words? It was some... I paraphrase here, right? The largest independent suspension roof on any stadium in the world. It was something like that. There was some boast about the roof. It's bloody massive. That wasn't the boast, but it was big. It was meant to be quite an engineering marvel. It was impressive. Remember that? The biggest screens on any football ground, and the roof was blah, 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 blah. All that stuff. However, it is still a temporary structure. The top half of that stadium is still a temporary structure that was due to be broken down at the end of 2012. It's already done far more than we ever thought that it could do. And to be fair, certainly if the Emirates Stadium roof is leaking, and that was built to be permanent, a whole lot of it, then certainly ours can. And it's just another thing, I hadn't even thought of it when I did the video a couple of days ago about the maintenance costs of the stadium. I mean, that's going to... If they're struggling anyway, and I'm talking who are they, the stadium operators, once it starts breaking down and falling to bits, that's not going to help either. I mean, it's the sort of thing... These big structures require teams of people working constantly. Do you know what? I digress. I remember watching something recently. It's about the Severn Bridge. They start painting it. There's these team of guys who paint the Severn Bridge. And all the cables, a suspension bridge, right? All the cables and everything on it, and all the cold press rivets and all the stuff that go in to make this bridge. And by the time they finish painting it, this team of painters have to go back and start painting it again because it takes them so long to do it. I'd imagine it's something similar. This thing got to remember about the Olympic Stadium. Whilst we might be arguing that it's 60,000 or it's 57,000 or it's 63,000, it was originally built as a 90,000-seater stadium. It's big. Its footprint, the footprint of the stadium is about the size of Wembley. It's massive. So I sort of understand why... Why the landlords are a bit peed off. It also makes absolute sense why David Sullivan is saying, you know, there's our $3 million a year. There you go. Crack on. I do think it's unsustainable. But reading between the lines, I guess the headlines of this video really are, and I'm just, you know, it's just all, I'm thinking it as I'm going along. I guess the headlines are, West Ham don't want to own the stadium, and the London Stadium, formerly Olympic Stadium, is broken.